All right, this is Kathy Hanville again, talking about anxiety-free solutions for a social media world, legal and ethical issues for therapists. And this section is on nuts and bolts, the nuts and bolts of HIPAA compliance, trying to break it down into the basics of what you need to do in order to be compliant with HIPAA in plain language that's easily understood. All right, so this is the list of the most important things you need to do in order to become HIPAA compliant. You need a privacy policy. It needs to be posted prominently at your office and on your website if you have a website. You need to document regular training on HIPAA for yourself and any staff or interns that you might have. You need to look at any physical safeguards of your office, including locked office doors and file cabinets. You need to review technical safeguards to ensure compliance. So that would include things like a firewall on a computer that you use for work. Anything that has client data on needs to be super protected and password protected, preferably even encrypted files. You need to make sure any place that you store EPI, which is electronic protected health information, is HIPAA compliant. So it's pretty standard, like Simple Practice Therapy, and all of them are HIPAA compliant. But you need to make sure, if you use somebody different, that you verify that and you have a business associate agreement with them. And have a folder for those business associate agreements. And if you outsource billing and your biller has access to client information, like even just their names, that's protected health information, and you need to have a business associate agreement with them. You need a protected health information release of information, and the difference between that and maybe a basic release of information is that this needs to include an expiration date and a statement that it can be revoked at any time. You should either develop forms or make sure you have access to ways to document any complaints or requests made for protected health information. California CAMFT has some great information and forms that you can use if you're a member, and you can also buy those forms. And in this course, I include some basic forms that I've developed that you will have access to in a Word document so that you can adapt them to make them right for you. And making sure your client files have notations of any time you release protected health information so that if a client asks you when you released it, you can easily gather that data. Or you can have it in a separate place. It doesn't matter as long as you are tracking it. If you are a covered entity, which means you are covered by HIPAA, you need to post your privacy policy on your website. I mentioned that before. And now we're going to get into even more of the nuts and bolts. So let's start with email. So the best practice with email is to use an encrypted email provider such as Hushmail. That costs about $10 a month. And if you do use an unencrypted email, you have to just make sure your email is secure. You use a strong password. You're not using it for anything else. You're changing it often. You can also use, if you're using Gmail or something, you can use two-factor authentication, which I'll talk about more in a moment. And probably most of us don't do this, but you should be logging out of your email account and closing your web browsers after each use. Obviously, you should never email your clients on a public computer or unsecured network. So if you're out at Starbucks for coffee or anywhere for coffee or tea, don't use an unsecure network. Use your cellular network or something that's protected. Always double check the address field to make sure you're sending the email to the correct recipient. We've all heard horror stories or stories of somebody sending it out to a bunch of clients thinking that they were blind copying them and CCing them. You should consider using a confidentiality disclaimer in the content of your emails, similar to what we use for faxes. And if you use unsecured email to communicate with clients, you just need to have something in your informed consent letting people know that there's some risk to confidentiality. So HIPAA doesn't require you use this secure encrypted email, but they do require you to notify clients if you're using a not secure email service. Here is a sample email confidentiality disclaimer. I'm not going to read it to you because you can download the slides and read it and copy it yourself. You're welcome to use that. This is a list of some email providers. Hushmail is sort of the standard, but there's a couple of other companies, Paulbox, Proton. I've also relied on Person-Centered Tech a lot for information around that, and I always recommend them to everyone. They have much free information, but they also have a fair amount of paid information in courses and CEU courses you could take also. This is just reiterating you need to have it in your informed consent if you're not using encrypted email. And this is an example of something you might want to put in your informed consent. You're also calling out in this one phone and fax communication, all right? And in your informed consent, you can include other issues related to email, including if you even will email with your clients, if it's encrypted or not, and if you keep the emails in the records, which is generally recommended you do. Exceptions sort of being scheduling emails, but anything of clinical importance should be kept in the file. The next part is data security. And there's a security risk analysis. There's some different videos that cover that in more depth. Some information about electronic health records, credit cards. That's also a separate video in the financial section. Use of devices, other data that may need to be secured, and disposal of electronic information. So I bet you didn't even know that there was so much to be thinking about. Two-factor verification is something that is recommended you use on accounts, and this basically means when you're logging into an account, you put in your password and then they ask you to verify in another way. So they either text you or email you a code that you have to type in, or that you can use an app like Duo Mobile where they send a code and you have to tap it in, and it just adds another layer of security to things. And it also means if somebody cracks your password, they can't get in. So, that's the protection. Electronic health records, you need to make sure your providers state that they're following HIPAA rules. I mean, that's pretty standard. That's what they're in the business to do. They need to be using their encryption. You need to have your business associate agreement. And if multiple people have access to the electronic health record, there needs to be a way for you to track access. I think that's pretty standard in most programs, but you should definitely look into it if you have a group practice. Back to business associate agreements, there's a link there to a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services article on it. And, you can find samples on the internet, although many of the companies have, I know Hushmail, Therapy Notes, Phone.com, places that I've done work with, they've all have a standard BAA that they send you and will sign. Phones can be very easily compromised, and 80% of us have use a personal mobile device to access data. So it's really important that we're aware of the ways we can have breaches. You're sending a message to the wrong person. It's a message is intercepted on an open Wi-Fi network. You lose your phone and it has electronic protected health information on it. So securing your device, the threats we've talked about, email, networking, loss of device, any online cloud syncing, and applications on your phone with access to your personal information. It's just always, you just need to be very careful when you're installing any apps on your phone that you look at what access they're trying to get. I mean, there's plenty of, I actually use a Fitbit, and it asks me pretty much every single time, do I want to give all of this other information, including like my location, and many of them ask for contacts, and that's a place where you might potentially have client information if you have it in your phone. So you just really want to be very mindful of that. So the best way to secure your mobile phone is not to keep client information on that. That may not be realistic. Obviously being careful with your devices, set your device to lock after a short period of time, make sure all of your devices are encrypted. If you're backing it up to a cloud, it's encrypted there. Using a tough login, a strong login. Instead of the 4-digit login, you can create a 6-digit, and then also the two-factor verification. Making sure you keep up with all the updates to your devices, because many times those are security updates that we just don't even have information about. And making sure on any smartphone that you have a program that can erase the data on the phone if you lose the phone. This is really serious because this is one of the areas that the physical loss of device is one of the main HIPAA complaints, and they take it really seriously because they think of it as very easily preventable. So this physical therapist had an unencrypted laptop stolen from their office, and they were fined $1.7 million. And it was a large fine because they knew it was a weak point and they didn't correct it. So that's important. Another one, it's a medical one, another very large fine. So lost laptops in particular are fined pretty heavily, so you really need a way to erase the computer or have it very encrypted. Same thing for a flash drive. Another real case, and this is sort of one of those like, it can happen so easily. An HIV positive patient asked the office manager to fax medical records to a new doctor, and the office manager sent them to his new employer instead. They were actually a little bit more lenient with that because I think that they recognized that it wasn't an accident, and they mandated a lot of regular HIPAA training for all the employees. Securing computers, again, best practice is to not keep information with protected health information on your computer, but if so, you have a strong password, you don't have security settings to the default security settings, you have them as tight as possible, you install a firewall and a virus protection, and you can also get an electronic shredding program so that if you have, sometimes I'll occasionally write a letter for a client and I'll send it to them, and then I will shred it on my computer so it's not saved on my computer at all. I use this program, Clean My Mac, that has an electronic shredding program. It does other things too. I think it's about $35 a year. There's other programs. This is just one I happen to use. I don't have any investment in it. And then also if you have a backup drive, files might be stored there, so that they also must be secure. What's a strong password? And we all know this, and I think a lot of us also don't necessarily follow this. 8 characters, not used as a password for any other account, capitals and lowercase mixes, numbers, special figures, and no use of any word that can be found in a dictionary. I think that's definitely a place many of us fail. Regarding your phone, again, you can, there are secure options for you, and HIPAA compliant. Your regular cell phone is not HIPAA compliant, and again, it's not against the rules to use it, you just have to disclose it. I like also having a separate number for my work, but a lot of people use their same number. Same with texting, best in practice to use encrypted text if you're going to text with clients. You can use a secure texting app such as Spruce Care, but that requires the client use the same app. And it's the same obligations that you have as far as email and a phone line. You're obligated to warn of the risk, and they must accept it. So it needs to be in your informed consent. You can generally get a phone texting plan not a ton of money, $10 to $25 a month. I've used both iPlum app and phone.com app. I've been happy with both of them. So there are options where you can both text and make phone calls. So, I think a great option, and then, you're using a secure service. But that is an issue. You have to pay money for the compliance. So if you want to be compliant, your expenses are going to go up a little bit. This is something that we don't always think about, disposing of our electronic devices. You need to make sure there's no PHI on it or ePHI. One of the things that's easily forgotten about is copiers and printers. With the new technology of scanning, many of those items have save stuff on there, so you need to make sure there's not protected health information on there. You can I got rid of some copiers or printers recently, and I was able to Google what you needed to do to get anything out of the memory that was in there, which for some things is just like unplugging for 30 seconds. But you definitely need to look into it and make you do it. And the more sophisticated the item in, the more you may have to do. That's just about the printers. And if you get rid of a computer, you need to just make sure you're not just erasing everything, but that you totally reformat it. You can generally buy a program that will do this for you or get it professionally done, but it needs to be so that no information can be retrieved. And I think the last one I bought, and I don't know why they use this as a gauge, was so they said it was like military level. You know, I don't know how I feel about that, but if you're getting rid of phones, you need to make sure an older phone, if those even exist anymore, that they have a SIM card that you take out. And if they don't have a SIM card and they're just storing it on the phone, you can actually have the phone electronically shredded. I've done that a few times in the past. I just throw it in a big dumpster and shred it. For smartphones, generally a total reset of the phone erases everything. But again, you have to make sure that anything backed up to the cloud is erased or secured too. And so I mentioned electronic shredding or magnetize, and you know, there's lots of places that do this now. There's big demands, and the costs are pretty reasonable. Yeah, this is a case where somebody was sued over. They got rid of photocopiers, and they sent them back to the leasing agent, and there was information on there. So yes, that was not good. And then there's another case of this man who had his license suspended because he was sending bills to collection. I guess he sent it to a collection company. They sent it they went to court, and they didn't take out the information. So it's just making sure that that's all done if you're going to do anything like that. He did sue that company that did that. All right, so that's your nuts and bolts of complying with HIPAA. I hope you find it helpful. Thanks for listening.